So the beginning of this is review. We've changed percentages to decimals. We've talked about a percentage being a number over 100. So 62 hundredths is written as 0.062. So we can change a percentage, 62% to 0.62. We can add the date for today's notes. Today is October 4th. So we're going to look now at some that are a little bit trickier as far as changing percentages. Okay? 7%, this one's trickier because the mistake that's made, and I'll make it over here, a lot of students see 7%, they write 0.7. That is not correct, because if we think a percentage is out of 100, 7% is 7 out of 100, and then changing hundredths, that means that number has to be in our hundredths category. So we get 0.07. Now, sometimes percentages have halves or quarters. We'll talk about, like in C, you might see an interest rate. You buy a car, and they say, we'll offer 5.25%. So we need to know, how do we change a fraction within a percent to a decimal? So first of all, this 13.5%, are you okay that another way of writing a half is 0.5? So 13.5 would be the same as 13.5%, which, as a fraction, could be written as 13.5 over 100. Whatever is in your ones column, that 3, that's going to be your hundredths. And so as a decimal, we'd have 0.13 and then an extra 5. In fact, 13.5% out of 100 is the same as 135 out of 1,000. So if you do get an interest rate when you buy your first car at 5.25%, because 5.25, remember a quarter is 25 cents, so changing that to a decimal would be 5.25, which is the same as 5.25 over 100. And since the 5 is in your ones column, as a fraction over 100, that 5 will be in the hundredths column. And so changing that to a decimal becomes 0.0525. And 112%, that's 112 over 100 still. It's always over 100. The 2 is in your ones. So if you work backwards, that 2 is in your ones column. That's going to be here in the hundredths. And so 112% as a decimal will be 1.12. So those are a little bit more complicated percentages changing into decimals. So we reviewed a concept we already learned, and now we push it a little bit further. Sometimes you're going to be asked to write numbers in between two numbers. Like if I gave you whole numbers, can you tell me two numbers between 3 and 80? That would be really easy, right? I said, what are two numbers between 3 and 80? Any two numbers. That'd be easy. 10, 15, done. Okay? But as we get into our rational numbers and fractions, if I say, what are two numbers between 1/4 and 1/2? This gets a little bit more difficult to write two rational numbers. And sometimes this same question would say, this one says two rational numbers. That lets you have any choice you'd like. But sometimes it would say, can you write two fractions between 1/4 and 1/2? So if we think of our number line, and we change both of these to decimals, are you okay that 1/2 is 0.5 and 1/4 is 0.25? And if I label those on my number line, here's 1/2, here's 1/4. And I had my number line between 0 and 1. I had it going by 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. If I label those, can you see two rational numbers between 1/4 and 1/2 are, well, there's two that are right there that we can see right from our number line. 0.3 and 0.4. That doesn't mean that those are the only two numbers in between. If I wanted to, could you see if I split this up and picked a number in here? That I could have like 0.33 in there? That could be another possibility. So it said two rational numbers. Rational numbers are fractions, decimals that terminate, decimals that repeat. These fit. If you wanted to write these as fractions, we could change 0.3 to 3/10. That would be a fraction in between 1/4 and 1/2. And 0.4 is 4/10, which reduces to 2/5. That would be another fraction in between 1/4 and 1/2. So here's another one that will work together. A couple of things we notice in this one is this question says write two integers. So here's the language that we've been talking about, our number families. We had used the symbol for integers. We remembered that integers were your positive and negative whole numbers, including 0. Those are integers. So here we have a number line going from -4 all the way to 2.0. We want to put 1.25 on there. 1.25 is right halfway in between 1 and 1.5. It's 1 1/4. So a couple of things that you could do to figure out where to label this. You could recognize that these are all going by 0.1s. And so where's 1.25? It's going to happen between 1.2 and 1.3. Now, 2.5 to be between 2 and 3, I mean, sometimes you can think of 1.2 as really 1.20, and 1.3 is 1.30. Does it make sense that 1.25 is in between? And then we have -3.26. So on here, I have -3.1, -3.2, -3.3. So if I have -3.2 and -3.3, I can think of -3.2 as -3.20, and -3 is -3.30. So -3.26 would fit in between them. Which one would it be closer to? Well, 26 is closer to 30. So when I'm labeling it on here in between, maybe I'm a tad bit closer and labeling -3.26. This question said we need to have two integers between here and here. So our possible answers, you could have -3, -2, -1, 0, or 1. And you would just have to pick any two of those to be right. But if you pick -4, it's too far this way. And if you pick +2, it's too far this way. You're just looking for numbers in between. So that worksheet that I gave you gets you to practice that. Sometimes it says rational numbers, sometimes it says integers. So we have to read our questions carefully